Hello everyone, I am the HMJ or Jerome and welcome to another video. First of all, I want to say sorry for the really shitty lighting because it's at night right now and the sun is set and basically nothing can really get light in my face except this one lamp over there, so lighting is probably pretty fucking shitty. But at the time of making this video, it is currently 8:02 p.m. at March 14th, 2019. Now, if you're curious as to why I'm mentioning this, it's because tomorrow it will have been 20 years since Fishmans' lead singer Shinji Sato tragically died of heart failure. I originally wanted the next video on my channel to be Gentle Giant albums ranked, but that will have to come later because it just doesn't feel right not to make a video about one of my favorite bands ever on the 20th anniversary of the lead singer's death. And now this video, instead of being like a singular album review like that Selling England video you should probably watch if you haven't already, it's gonna be like a bunch of mini reviews of all the Fishmans albums. So tell me which format you like more, because this will be less in-depth as to each album and each song, but will show a lot more about the artist and how I feel about each album, about said artists. So tell me in the comments, do you like this format more or less, and I'll consider what I should do in the future. Also, the reviews are limited to just full-length albums, so yes, that rules out any compilation albums you like, and yes, that does rule out their December 28th, 1998 performance, which is the best live performance I've ever listened to. I should probably make a video about this someday, like a full-length video explaining why this is my favorite live performance of all time, but this will not be mentioned in this video because I'm gonna limit myself to just full-length albums, LPs. So now, without further rambling, let's get straight into this band. The Fishmans is a Japanese dream pop / dub band which was formed by Shinji Sato on guitar and vocals, Kenichi Moteji on percussions, and Yusuru Kashiwabara on bass guitar. Throughout their career, the Fishmans have released 7 studio albums, which I will be counting down and reviewing starting now. Neo Yankees Holiday is undoubtedly my least favorite Fishmans album. While it is a very fun listen, I just don't think it's really that perfect or they put that much effort into it. While it's a very fun listen, it just kind of feels like a B-sides compilation and an unreleased songs compilation more than anything else. And I mean, most of these songs are good, but they're just not memorable, and they don't have that special vibe that other Fishman songs have. Admittedly, there are some really enjoyable songs in this album, like 1, 2, 3, 4 or Walking or Supa are really enjoyable tracks, but it just lacks this magic and aura that the other Fishmans albums have. Another thing that bothers me about this album is the weird transitions. It's as if the transitions end before the song are actually meant to, as if the songs were just unfinished. So I mean, this album is nothing else to me than just a compilation album. It's what it feels like. So yeah, I give this album a 6.5 out of 10. To my ears, this is definitely some of the Fishmans' most experimental work. Tracks like Diving or Mineral Water are just very hardly accessible and they just don't click very well for me. This album also contains several short joke songs, if you call them that, like from 7 to 30 seconds, something like that, and they just add nothing to my listening pleasure and they just feel like filler content. However, this album still has some very enjoyable and classic tracks for me. For example, Ami Otoko Nikumarehu is one of my favorite Fishman songs because it's just very catchy. It's one of their most groovy songs, if that makes sense. However, this album is just overall very, messy. It just doesn't feel like they put a lot of heart and soul into this, and if they did, it looks like they were pretty confused as to where they were going. This was their second studio album, and it feels like they were lost, and this is just a very messy experience. However, even though they were looking for their place to go musically, that's still a very enjoyable album, and my rating for it is 6.8 out of 10. Now we're getting into fucking amazing albums, so get ready. Orange is a classic of Japanese dub music. Just hearing this album will remind you how much nothing ever feels old with this band. Everything is so fresh and unique and amazing. Unlike the previously mentioned albums, this album knows where it's going. It's going straight for that one style and genre that it knows it's going for, and it's just such an amazing experience. Melody is an amazing track. It sounds like something straight out of a Japanese 80s movie ending, and frankly it's one of their most catchy songs because it still feels unique despite having this stereotypical movie ending vibe to it. Wasure Shao Itori, My Life, and Melody are three of my favorite Fishmans songs, and the rest of the album is not any weaker. It's an experience that you deserve and you must live. It's an album that I would recommend to pretty much anyone. This album is an undoubtable 8.9 out of 10 for me. It's just a super underrated classic of Japanese music. This is the Fishmans' debut album, Chappie Don't Cry. This is often seen as one of the lowest rated albums of the Fishmans, and I mean, I can see why, but holy shit do I love this album. The bass lines just build the song. Never have I listened to an album that gives more love to the bass than Chappie Don't Cry. These are some of the catchiest bass lines I've ever heard. This album is absolutely phenomenal for me. When starting to listen to this album, in the first track, which I'm not even going to attempt pronouncing the name of, you're greeted with this epic bass line that just shows you the strength of the bass in this album and how much it builds the melody. If it wasn't for the bass lines, this album would be very much lower. This was, in my opinion, the peak of the Fishmans' dub music. And even though it was their debut album and it wasn't very critically acclaimed, it's still one of my favorite albums of all time, and it has some of the best bass lines I've ever heard, and I'm so glad this album exists. Giving this album a 9 out of 10 because it's just exceptional. I love the bass in this album so much, and I know this is very much centered about the bass and me being a bass player, but trust me, when you listen to this, you'll just love the bass 1 billion times more than you did before. Kuju Camp was their first dream pop project, and being a huge fan of this genre, this is obviously going to be one of my favorite albums from them. This album is just a constant stream of emotions. It feels like being dragged into the air and being stuck in the sky until the album finishes. If you look at the album cover, that's what it feels like listening to this album. This has some of the smartest songwriting I've heard from these guys. I've said this once and I'll say it again. This album was to dream pop what In the Court of the Crimson King was to prog rock. It was an absolutely phenomenal and avant-gardist album. So yeah, this album is a 9.5 for me. There's pretty much no doubt to it. This album is just very exceptional. It was pretty much one of the first dream pop albums, like one of the oldest I can find actually. Now some dream pop expert is going to bash me in the comments telling me that there was a bunch of dream pop fans and bands before that. However, you can't deny that this has probably had a big influence on dream pop in general. Now, before you ask me, that was a fucking pain in the ass to write on the chalkboard. I didn't have enough space to work with, so I had to put the last character under because I just didn't have enough space to work with. Please don't fucking hate me. But yeah, at number 2 we have Uchu Nippon Setagaya. Now imagine that Kuchu Camp mentioned album I just mentioned, and now imagine that, but like 10 times as emotional and as perfected and worked with as Kuchu Camp, and you got this album right here. This was their final album and also their longest one by quite a bit, clocking in at about 58 minutes. This album starts off with a super sleepy and dreamy song called Poka Poka, and while it's not really a complicated song, it just works so well because after Poka Poka you're met with Weather Report, which is one of the most beautiful ambient dream pop tracks I have ever heard in my entire life. This is one of their most beautiful tracks they've put out. It's an actual masterpiece. The use of reverb and all the drums and the keys, everything, it's just done exceptionally to such a beautiful level, and it's an underrated masterpiece of ambient pop. After this beautiful, mesmerizing experience you just had, you're gonna be met with some of the most beautiful dream pop tracks you will have ever heard. It will just follow that pattern of dream pop for a bit, until the following track just explodes into energy and fades out. In the Flight is one of the most beautiful lullabies I've ever heard. It's a super calm song that starts with a drum solo, and it's just this album throughout the entirety of it just sends you to another planet. It's unbelievable how mesmerizing this album can be. And even if you're not a dream pop slash ambient pop type of person, this album has you covered because it has two of their most upbeat and catchy songs, Magic Love and, of course, the classic Walking in the Rhythm. Speaking of Walking in the Rhythm, it's a 12-minute monster masterpiece that is probably the Fishmans' most known and iconic songs that isn't 35 minutes long, which we'll get to later. This album ends with a beautiful 8-minute track that reminds you of that beautiful, psychedelic, dreamy experience you just lived. This album has a very high grade of a 9.7 out of 10. It's just such a beautiful experience that everyone deserves to live, and honestly, you just need to go on Spotify and listen to that album right now. Yeah, I bet you didn't see that one coming. And yeah, you guessed it, this album is their magnum opus for pretty much anyone you ask. This album is a 35-minute masterpiece which will change your life and bring you to places that no other record has ever brought you to, and I promise you that. I was introduced to this album in my 2018 Spotify Wrapped when they give you like this list of recommended songs, and that was the first one on the top of the list, so I naturally put my earpods on and gave it a listen, and holy shit, dude, my life has changed after listening to this. With this track, you're greeted with a fucking beautiful bass line that you're never going to forget about, and everything just slowly starts kicking in, and every instrument just has its place, and while it's admittedly a very repetitive track, it's probably some of the most dreamy and beautiful, psychedelic, weird, experimental shit I've ever heard. I just love this album so damn much, and I'm shaking almost as I'm saying this because this album has truly changed my life. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. This track has literally everything you could ask for. It has a fucking violin part, it has accordion, it has that super cool guitar solo with a bunch of pedals in the beginning. This is just insanity, and this track is... oh my god, do I love this album. You can probably see by my emotions when saying this that this album has truly been a life changer, and you just truly deserve to hear this. This album has changed my life. It's the reason why I even listen to the Fishmans nowadays. And it's undoubtedly a 10 out of 10. It's just such a beautiful album, and you should definitely listen to it right now. So yeah, once again, rest in peace, Shinji Sato. It's that guy's death was one of the biggest recent losses to the music industry. Like, this band has had so much potential, and they brought out so many good things while they were still a band, you know? And it's just very sad to see someone as talented as he is die so young at the age of 33. And yeah, I mean, thank you all for watching. You should tell me in the comments what I should review next, and I'll see you all next time.